It's done, as Charles-Andreas Brym, the 26-year-old Canadian striker, is on the move but staying in the top flight of Dutch football in the Eredivisie with NAC Breda, a side that just staved off relegation last year in the Eredivisie. And Charles-Andreas Brym leaves Almere City FC behind, a side where he spent the second half of last season's campaign with in the Eredivisie. And he had a decent campaign with Almere City FC, who are relegated. But this is a very exciting move for Charles-Andreas Brym, joining a side in NAC Breda who are looking for their goal scorer, looking for their new number 9 to see them elevate up the table in the Eredivisie and finally find a true goal scorer in Charles-Andreas Brym. And it's a major question, will he finally get those consistent minutes as a starting number 9, and will he be the man for NAC Breda? And was this the right club? And we're going to break it all down, guys, give you guys my thoughts and opinions on this move for Charles-Andreas Brym. Before we dive into things, make sure to drop down below into the comments letting me know your thoughts on Charles-Andreas Brym joining NAC Breda and if it was the right move. Make sure to smash that like button, hit that sub button as we move closer to 700 subscribers, and let's dive into things. As it has been reported from a Dutch journalist that NAC Breda brings in Charles-Andreas Brym. The striker from Almere City FC signs on a contract for the next 3 years. And it has been announced that the Canadian will be a solid boost, and that is what the club has called it, a solid boost for a signing, and pays a transfer fee for the Canadian striker from Almere City of 150,000 euros. That has been reported from Transfer Market. So it's a decent fee for Charles-Andreas Brym, who never really hit the ground running with Sparta Rotterdam, with Almere City FC, but still has the potential and still did show some bright signs with Almere City FC and still brings a lot of potential for NAC Breda next season in the Eredivisie. But it has been announced from the technical director from NAC Breda in Peter Maas on the transfer that he has said this, quote, "With Charles-Andreas, we are bringing in a player who can perform on both wings and behind the strikers," which is very interesting to say, because that means they don't just see Charles-Andreas Brym as a straight-out number 9. They don't see Charles-Andreas Brym as a straight-out goal scorer. They see him as a player who's going to be utilized and versatility in multiple different positions for NAC Breda in the Eredivisie, which is very exciting because it means more opportunities, more chances at minutes for Charles-Andreas Brym in a top league in the Eredivisie, which is very exciting and key to his progress as a footballer. We have to remember, Charles-Andreas Brym is still only 26 years old. He isn't that old still. He still has a lot to prove. He still has a lot of potential. And we have to remember, he's playing in a top league. He's playing in an Eredivisie where he's playing against sides like Feyenoord, like Ajax, like AZ Alkmaar. This is a very good league. And the fact that Charles-Andreas Brym still might be starting in the Eredivisie on a weekly basis for NAC Breda is a major boost. But the fact that they say that they look to utilize Charles-Andreas Brym and see him as a player who can play on both wings as well as behind the strikers is very exciting, because he won't just be used as a primary number 9. It gives him multiple ways, multiple outlets to break into the starting 11 for NAC Breda next season. But looking at Charles-Andreas Brym's profile, it's very exciting because, of course, his number 1 attribute is looking at his versatility. His ability to play in multiple different positions, which is a huge boost for Charles-Andreas Brym joining a side in NAC Breda who are looking for goal scorers, looking for players who can put the ball in the back of the net and give some creativity. This is a Canadian striker who has never really been given that true chance in the Eredivisie. Yes, he got minutes with Almere City FC in the second half of last season's campaign with Sparta Rotterdam when he was bought there, got some opportunities, never really got a true chance to prove himself. With NAC Breda having the chance to be a versatile attacker, he might finally get that chance to start week in and week out in the Eredivisie, and that is a huge boost for Charles-Andreas Brym. Boosts his confidence, finally gives him a chance to prove himself, because I really do believe there is a player there in Charles-Andreas Brym, and I think he can show it at NAC Breda. But the fact he has so much versatility, the fact that the technical director believes he can play on the left, can play on the right, as well as the number 10 behind the strikers, is a huge boost and is very exciting, because it also gives the Canadian national team an outlet and a new player who can play on the left, can play on the right, can play as a number 10, which is a huge position of need for the Canadian men's national team, but also up top at number 9. So Charles-Andreas Brym being able to play 4 different positions is a major boost for NAC Breda and a side looking for an out-and-out goal scorer. But also Charles-Andreas Brym is coming off a decent campaign. I was a fan of what he did last season with Almere City FC. We have to remember, Almere City FC were not a side that scored goals for fun. Yes, they were one of the better sides at playing football last season in the Eredivisie for the teams that got relegated, as Almere City FC went down on 23 goals. Abysmal from 34 games. They couldn't score goals to save their lives. And yes, they did play some decent football, but they still weren't a side that could create chances, that could put the ball in the back of the net. So for Charles-Andreas Brym to still come away with his campaign from Almere City FC through 17 appearances, scoring 3 goals and having 2 assists, having 5 goal contributions, which is pretty impressive for a side that only managed to score 23 goals, is decent, especially when he only had 17 appearances for a side that lacked any sort of creativity. It's a decent return for Charles-Andreas Brym for a side that massively struggled last season in the Eredivisie and the top flight of Dutch football. He had 1,600 minutes across 18 starts and had 29 matches across his whole year, as he did have time with Sparta Rotterdam last season. But this is very exciting for the likes of Charles-Andreas Brym, who's still 26 years old, still has a lot to prove, has a lot to grow, and what he does bring to his game for NAC Breda is his ability on the ball. Charles-Andreas Brym is very good technically with the ball at his feet. His dribbling ability, he likes to get at players, he likes to get at defenders for Canadians. He's very good with his feet and dribbling with the ball and going at his defenders. He does have some pace and is able to get at defenders as well very quickly, and is very creative with the ball at his feet, which is very exciting. Getting the ball to Charles-Andreas Brym, you can also see the ability to create chances and to try to have an outlet for your number 9 or for your wingers as well, depending where he is being utilized. He still needs to work on his finishing, he still needs to work on his chance creation in front of goal, but Charles-Andreas Brym with the ball at his feet is still a very dangerous player, and he is, of course, a left-footed attacker. And he has a lot to bring to NAC Breda, because so far, if you're asking me, will he start? Will he be their number 9? Well, I find it very interesting that they pointed out he can play on both wings as well as behind the strikers, not as a number 9. But looking at Charles-Andreas Brym, he's an out-and-out number 9. What does NAC Breda have right now? No striker. Their current striker is the likes of Sidney van Hooijdonk, who played last season for NAC Breda, scoring no goals, no assists across 12 matches. And you're asking me where their other strikers are? Well, their starting striker from last season, who scored 8 goals for them across the campaign, is gone. He is finito. He is no longer with NAC Breda. So this opens up a huge gap, a huge outlet for Charles-Andreas Brym to be able to start down the middle for NAC Breda to open up the Eredivisie campaign. And yes, they still have another option who was brought in this year in a 20-year-old French striker in Moussa Soumano, who was brought in from a French club in AC Associated, who I might have butchered the pronunciation with, but that is where he's come in for a fee of 450,000 euros. So they brought in 2 strikers for a decent fee, but no one's been an outstanding price. So there is a huge opportunity here for Charles-Andreas Brym to be the starting number 9. And I'm not sure if he will be the starting number 9, but with them saying he can play on both wings, saying he can play as a number 10, there is a great option that we see Charles-Andreas Brym starting on a weekly basis in the Eredivisie, one of the best leagues in world football, and a great opportunity. We have another Canadian playing consistently in a top league. And I truly believe starting the Eredivisie season, we will see Charles-Andreas Brym work his way into this team and start regularly, because I'm a huge fan of Charles-Andreas Brym, and I think he still has a lot to prove at the age of 26, and there is still a good player in there. And with starting minutes, Charles-Andreas Brym, this can be a smash transfer for NAC Breda at only 150,000 euros for a side that don't have an out-and-out striker, for a side that look to utilize Charles-Andreas Brym in this formation, as they do play a 4-3-3. But this is a very exciting move for Charles-Andreas Brym, who should suit this side very well and has a major opportunity here to earn starting minutes for NAC Breda in the Eredivisie. If I butchered the pronunciation of NAC Breda, guys, let me know down below. I do apologize to Dutch supporters and NAC Breda supporters. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Canamity supporters, Canadians, NAC Breda supporters, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments about this transfer. Was it the right move? Personally, I will give this a B plus for Charles-Andreas Brym, managing to find a club that needs a goal scorer, a club that looks to him as a solid boost to the roster, as a player that can be utilized in different positions, and also a club that sees Charles-Andreas Brym playing in a top league and not having to fall to the second division of Dutch football. A very smart move by Charles-Andreas Brym, and I'm giving it a B+. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure to smash that like button, guys, if you're enjoying the content, and hit that sub button as we move closer to 700 subscribers. I'll see you guys for the next one. Peace.